It's not just because of the sign, the proof. It is because of the mitzvah that Moshe said in the Torah. As this is what the Rambam does right. Even though we don't know if it's true or it's sorcery or not, we still don't care because the Torah says that you should listen to the Navi. He does these signs, but he's seeking to contradict Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy through his prophecy. So the Torah says you have to believe him, but since the Torah says you have to believe him, now he's trying to contradict Moshe Rabbeinu. So Rambam should have said, because the mit is a makrish Torah. So then you're saying that the Torah isn't true, because you're saying that what Moshe Rabbeinu said isn't true. The whole basis why we believe the Navi in the first place is because the Torah says Il Tishma. He wants to believe from the Torah Moshe as a Navi to contradict what Moshe Rabbeinu said. That mitzvah Torah. Is a feeling boys, even if it materializes that the sign and the miracle and the proof, don't listen to that Navi because that's against the Torah. Not to tell you, well, his proof cannot. Why go into the logic over here? The logic is not the place of the other Chazakah. So basically, since we have established, Rebbe is asking in base, since we established that the reason why the Rambam is explaining we listen to the Navi is because it's a Torah halacha, and the Torah says to listen to the Navi, even though we don't know, maybe he's doing sorcery, maybe he's not doing sorcery. The Torah says if he makes a sign, you should listen to him. So we know the Torah is listed. So why is the reason why if he's coming to contradict Moshe Rabbeinu, then we don't listen to him? Very obvious, because he doesn't have his whole legitimacy is because he is from the Torah, and here he's coming to deny the Torah. So we don't care about proofs or things like that because that's from the Torah. The logical proof that we have, it's a greater proof of Moshe Rabbeinu because you saw it, experienced it, it's greater than what the Navi says. That's a logical proof that why it doesn't belong seemingly in the Yad Chazak. Why basically what the Rebbe wants to say, prove is, why is the Rambam also trying to bring in the idea of proof, believing in the Navi because it's proof, notwithstanding the fact that the Rambam has established that it's a mitzvah. The Rebbe will explain that it's a necessary component in our belief in Hashem to also have proof so that it is vivid and it's without any hesitation, any doubts that it's Hashem. That comes through a proof. So there is room for prophecy as well, as we'll see the Rebbe explains. The Rebbe further shows now that in Perek Tes, again, the Rambam, 3 times, 2 times the Rambam in the beginning and the end of Perek Tes, the Rambam uses Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy, and then in the middle, he uses the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. What's this? The prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu or the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu? Rebbe will explain this. Furthermore, in the Perek Shel Achrizeh, in the chapter that follows, in Perek Tes, when we find as the Rambam Farbind Inyan HaTorah B'chlal, that the Rambam connects Torah in general with Nevuas Moshe, with the prophecy of Moshe. The Rambam talks about over there, wegen einem vozok, there was somebody who claims, who says, a prophet, he says, I'm a prophet, Hashem shlochoi, God sent me, lohisif mitzvah, to add a additional mitzvah. We have 613 mitzvahs. He says there's another mitzvah. or legroya mitzvah, or to take away one of the 613 mitzvahs. Or even he's not bringing a whole new mitzvah, taking away a mitzvah, it's just lefarish the mitzvah min ha-mitzvahs, to explain one of the mitzvahs, pirush sheloi shemanu Moshe, a interpretation that we haven't heard from Moshe. What tefillin are? I'll give an example. What tefillin are with this comes up with a new interpretation. Oisha Omar, or another thing he says, those mitzvahs that the Yidden were commanded, they're not forever, for generations to come, for generations. They were just at that time. So the Rambam says, what do we say about such a person? He is a false Navi. And now the Rambam writes precisely, because he's coming to contradict the prophecy of Moshe. Why does he use here the Lashon coming to contradict the prophecy of Moshe, not Torah's Moshe? And the same thing is the Rambam. The Rambam actually says a similar language in the end of the chapter. Over there, we're talking about another situation. Somebody comes and he says, Hashem commanded him that idol worship can be worshipped just today. Or in this hour, idol worship is permissible. So he says, if somebody comes, as there is here too, the Rambam uses the language, because so we can't listen to him because he's coming to contradict, again, not the Torah of Moshe, but the Nevuah of Moshe. So in the beginning and in the end of the 9th chapter, when the Rambam talks about coming to contradict Moshe, he doesn't say the Torah of Moshe, he says specifically the Nevuah of Moshe. Isn't it moving? So it's not understood. Since he is coming to contradict, not only coming to contradict the prophecy of Moshe, he's coming to contradict a command that we have from the Torah, not to. Torah says don't add to the Torah and don't take away from the Torah. He is coming to contradict that command of the Torah. And the other thing we say, that those mitzvahs that are revealed to us, we have to do them forever. There's no such thing as temporary. These are all psukim in the Torah very clearly. But the Rambam should have said, is coming to contradict the Torah, not the prophecy. Because coming to contradict the Torah is a higher and a very unique definition. That's a new and a novel that definition to contradict the Torah. And it's a very much more serious, more stringent than contradicting Moshe's prophecy. So why does the Rambam not say coming to contradict the Torah? He says coming to contradict the prophecy. We know, we said before that there is one definition of words of a Navi, and then there's the other definition, words of the Torah. Words of the Torah are much stronger than the words of the Navis. Kanal Sif Aleph, as we said before in Sif Aleph, as the Tzivum Shaldei Nevim, the commands which come from the prophets, which understood would include the prophecy of Moshe. They don't have that special, unique force of the mitzvahs of the Torah of Har Sinai. So why would the Rambam not say he's coming to contradict the Torah? And he uses the language that he's coming to be makrish the nevuah, not lakrish Torah. So there's one thing to say that somebody's contradicting the Torah. Okay, we don't believe him. But there's another thing when somebody becomes a Nevi HaSheker. To contradict the Torah, that's an Avera, that's a very stringent thing. It's taking against the Torah. But it doesn't make you a prophet because of that. There are special laws for somebody who becomes a Navi HaSheker. He's a false Navi, not somebody who goes against the Torah. We're talking about becoming a false prophet, a prophet that came to for the Torah speaks of all the laws, what you guys supposed to do to a false prophet. How do we know that he's a false prophet? Because he's contradicting the prophecy of Moshe. So we don't say just he's contradicting the Torah. The contradicting the Torah means that he's going against the Torah, but what makes him a false prophet is because he's going against the prophecy of Moshe. But the Rebbe says that doesn't really fit. Let's look inside. Dalet. L'chayre wollt me gekent masber sein. L'chayre we could have explained. As the far zog the Rambam la'akish nevosu shel Moshe. This is why the Rambam says to contradict the prophecy of Moshe, unit la'akish ha'Torah, and not to contradict the Torah. Well, davke durch dem kum de echocha hare zen over HaSheker. Because that's the way we come to the evidence that the person is a false prophet. He's a Nevi Sheker, is because he's contradicting the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu. He gets all the laws of Nevi Sheker. The Rambam is mevayer. The Rambam explained in the previous chapter, Periches, as we brought out earlier. As a Yois V'Nevuos, Moshe Rabbeinu Einal Yois, since Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy is not based on signs, but we actually witnesses, we saw with our eyes, out as mitzay makrish zayin nevuos shel Moshe, that when he contradicts Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy, is a makrish mashar yisa beinecha, then he's contradicting that which you have seen with your eyes. Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy, we witness, we experience, and now this Navi is a sheker because he's contradicting it. Das heißt, wenn der Rambam will gerät nur wegen dem Chomer Isur von der Buas sheker, if the Rambam will just be discussing the seriousness of how serious is the prohibition of sheker, he says that Hashem sent him to add the mitzvah. So the seriousness of this is not just coming to contradict the prophecy of Moshe. Then the Rambam would have said, "What the Dan given then he would say he is denying the Torah, because denying the Torah is greater, serious than denying and contradicting a prophecy." But the Rambam, when he's telling that he's coming to contradict, is oisin to geben atam. So the Rambam wants to say a reason. The Rambam is trying to explain why he's a false Navi. Shaharei, Farvosa is a Navi sheker, why he's a false prophet, which makes him into a prophet and against the laws of the sheker. The Riber Zog the Rambam, Lahakish Nevu Osi Shel Moshe, to contradict the Nevu of Moshe, and therefore he is a false prophet because Moshe is the real prophet and he is a false prophet. Very difficult, the Rebbe says. Rebbe is trying to explain that maybe he uses the prophecy of Moshe, not because we don't want to say the severity of what he's doing, but we want to establish him as a false prophet, as a prophet of false one. And that is because he is a false prophet, because he's going against the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, who is a much greater prophet, and we know that more, so we know that he's a false prophet. Aber der Tirz says, this is a very big difficulty. It's a great difficulty to give this answer. Since we already know that one who contradicts Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy, we already know, and you are contradicting something that we saw and that we heard, so we know already that you're contradicting Torah. That's the Rambam brought it down before the definition, as we explained in the beginning of the Sikha, from the first halachas in Perek Ches, that you are not just contradicting a prophet, you are contradicting the Torah, because when you contradict Moshe Rabbeinu, you're contradicting the Torah because we were all there, and Shemainu, and this gets a status, and Torah says that that's the established as a Torah matter. Is doch mistaber, so then it's logical. Loimar, ados is the tabu chaymer hilchos v'dinan of sheker. So that would be the reason, the seriousness of the maybe a sheker. You don't have to say because he's arguing on the Moshe Rabbeinu. It's because Moshe Rabbeinu's nevu has been established in the Torah. It would seem, according to this, he should have said Lak Shal Torah. The Rambam wants to know, the Rebbe wants to know, why is the Rambam holding on to the words Nevuas, Moshe Rabbeinu, which doesn't seem to bring out the full force when the Navi HaSheker is contradicting the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. And the fact that he's a Navi HaSheker, we already know just by going against the Torah, because the reason why it is the Torah, because it's been established that Moshe Rabbeinu's authenticity is from the Torah. So why does the Rambam not say Lak Shal Torah? The Rebbe says within the same Perek test later on, the Rambam uses the language to be Makrish Torah Taka, not Nevisa Torah. And the Rebbe is going to explain that the Akhoshe of the Torah is the same pasuk from which the Rambam uses here the Lashon Navi and the Nevi'us of Moshe Rabbeinu, and there he uses the Lashon of Torah's Moshe. I say, and the Rebbe increases the question that it is the same pasuk that you violate, which the Rambam discusses in the middle of the halachas, that he says that you're contradicting the mitzvahs of Torah. That's the same halachas that you're violating the Torah halacha that you're violating in the beginning of Perek Tes. Here the Rambam uses Lashon that he contradicts a Navi, the Nevuas Moshe, of the Torah Moshe. So what's going on over here? Hey, the Tmiya is not aggressive. The surprise is even greater. We can find in Zelben Perek, in this same chapter we find, as the Rambam nutz takadem Lashon lahakrish haTorah. The Rambam actually uses the language to contradict the Torah. The Rambam says like this: if he uprooted this Navi, uprooted a matter, an item, from those items that we have learned by tradition, or he says about a law from the laws of the Torah, that Hashem told him that this is the way the halacha, unlike we have it by tradition, who the halacha is like. Then he's a false prophet. Why? By saying this, he is contradicting the Torah. The Torah says, Lo b'shamayim. The Torah is not in the heaven, which means cannot decide, oh, Hashem told me this is the halacha. That means it's not in the heavens. The way we have it by tradition, that's the halacha. So, isn't it verstandig der shinui? So we don't understand this change over here. Writes lahakrish Torah, not lahakrish nevuas Moshe, but he said Torah. When the Rambam talks in the beginning of the Perek Tes to add a mitzvah, or to take away mitzvahs, or he says mitzvahs this man or you when the Navi says that the mitzvahs were temporary. And the same thing in the end of the Perik test when he says that Hashem told them that they can do now for a certain time of the Zorah. Zokter over there he says to contradict Moshe's prophecy. Or that when he says to uproot or halach of the Torah, or he says he uproots something which we have by tradition from the Rabbanon, or he says that Hashem told him that this is where the halach should be. Here he says to contradict the Torah. So he changes the lashon. And Nachmer, Shas Einer Zokt Hashem Lefarish Shlocha Lefarish v'Mitzvah Min Ha Mitzvahs. When he says that Hashem told me to explain a mitzvah and in the mitzvahs, Pirush Shalosh Manu Mimoshe, an interpretation that we haven't heard from Moshe. So what's the? If he comes up with his own interpretation, not what we have by tradition, the pshat in this mitzvah. It was the Rambam sagt Moshe. So the Rambam says that is coming over there. That's the prophecy of Moshe. So why? Which prohibition is he? Is seems to be contradicting that same pasuk. Those was the Torah zok le'mashamayim. So when the Rambam comes in the beginning of Perik Tes, and he says that the person is coming to say the halacha different, which is the pasuk he's coming to say, so he's contradicting the pasuk of Shemaimi. Fumanet learned up as a Navi Rashoy l'chadish davar. We say it's not by Shemayim because a Navi cannot come up with something new. So that's the same pasuk. The same pasuk. In the middle, the halacha that the Rambam says, Lachish HaTorah, if he says that they told him, Hashem tzivuloi shadin kachu, is makrish that same, that the pasuk of Leba Shamayim. Can't come and say that Hashem told you this is the halacha, because the Eibishter said, Leba Shamayim, you don't judge, nobody can come up with new halachas. And the Rambam was, if them zog the Rambam lachish HaTorah. Over here the Rambam said that contradicts the Torah. It's that same pasuk of a Leba Shamayim is the same thing which the Novi that is coming to contradict that Hashem told me this is the way to interpret the mitzvah. He gives him a new mitzvah. Why can't he explain that mitzvah that way? Leba Shamayim, it's not in them. So basically, they're both violating. Whether you're saying that you're interpreting a mitzvah different than we have it by tradition, or different than we heard from Moshe Rabbeinu, or if you contradict, if you say that the Eibishter told me a certain law is such a way, what is the pasuk on both of these cases? Is lo b'shamayim. The Torah is not b'shamayim. So when he is saying, then when he's saying about a mitzvah that the Eibishter tells him that this is the halacha, the Rambam said we don't list it because it's contradicting the Torah. But when he tells us that explain a mitzvah which we didn't hear from Moshe Rabbeinu, over there he says because it's going against the prophecy. Why over here prophecy of the mitzvah Torah? We bowed as Beidas and Emakis and Pasuk, since they're both contradicting the same verse. So why should we distinguish between they and say? As there was one who says Hashem sent me to explain a different interpretation is Bolachish Nevosa Shel Moshe. That person is coming to contradict Moshe's prophecy. And the one who says that the halacha should be such is Bolachish Torah, is contradicting the Torah. Why is this one contradicting the Moshe that the Torah? It seems to be contradicting that same pasuk. The Rebbe is going to try to explain now. He's going to suggest an explanation in the last part of the Rambam, and why the Rambam would use the lashon the Moshe for another totally other reason. This is based on what the Ragachover says, that there is a special, unique prohibition, in addition to contradicting the Torah, contradicting the words of a Navi. There's a special prohibition, something unique about a prophecy at the time of when a Navi prophesizes about worshiping Avodah Zarah. So when the Rambam, in the end, when the Rambam talks about the Navi is coming to tell that you can do Avodah Zarah, over there it's important to know that at that time he's prophesizing, because the fact that he's prophesizing gives him a unique status. Let's sit inside. The Rebbe says that if it's all about Avodah Zarah, then it should be in the laws of Avodah Zarah, not over here in Hilchos Yisod HaTorah. Let's look inside. Both. The Tam Farvos by Siyum HaPerik. So this is like a side point trying to explain, maybe understanding the last, in the end of Perik Tes, the last halacha that the Rambam brings down, why the Rambam over there uses the lashon that is coming to contradict the prophecy of Moshe. Because over there it's important to be a prophecy of Moshe. The Tam Favos by Siyum HaPerik. The reason why at the end of the chapter, the end of chapter 9, by them Vozocht, if you have a prophet who says, Shashem Tzivou Shetei Oved Avedis Kichod Mechud, he says, Hashem told me that idol worship should be worshipped. Zogt the Rambam the Loshen L'Hakish Nevoser Shel Moshe. There he's using the language to contradict the prophecy of Moshe. You could have explained this by introducing what steht in Sifri Ofen Pasuk. It says in the Sifri, on the verse, Perik Yudches, Pasuk Yudches, the Pasuk talks there about the Pasuk says, Novi Okiv Lohem Mekerev Acheim Komecho. Hashem is saying to Moshe, I will put up for them a prophet from amongst the brother just like you. V'nosati dvorei b'fiv, and I will put words in the mouth of the Navi. V'diber aleihim, and he will speak to them. Eskol asher tzavenu. And then everything I commanded. And then the pasuk goes on to tell you what happens if you don't listen to the Navi. You get Misa B'dei Shemayim for not listening, as the pasuk continues. So that means that one who violates the words of a prophet gets the special punishment that the pasuk says over there, the mitzvah b'dei shemayim. So the pasuk says v'diber aleihem. So the Sifri says it's not just what he says, but shaloi lahoyshiv aturgemon, that the prophet who Hashem sends to give over must say it by himself. He cannot place a translator in his place to give over that the Turgoman should give over. Basically, it means if you did put a translator, then that's not going to be considered violating the words of the Navi. Well, if tois, so it comes out according to this, as the din from over al divna Navi chayiv misbedei shomayim. That when do we say the halacha? One who violates the words of a Navi will be liable for Misa in B'dei Shomayim, in the hands of the heaven. Is davke when hertes mipi hanavi atzme. It's only when you hear it from the prophet himself. Und nicht wenn hertes mipi am Turkemon. Not if he hears it from the mouth of the Turkemon. So if the Navi says something, the Turkemon translates it, the other person hears it and violates it, he will not be punishable by the punishment of violating the words of a Navi because he did not hear from Navi directly. There is a further chiddush in there according to the Ragachover. And the Ragachover is moistened in them. Ragachover adds to this, as I feel when the hertes mipi Navi atzme. Even when you listen, you hear it from the prophecy itself. When do you have the violation of the chuyim b'misim b'dei shemayim? Is the chiv davke when the hertes and the Navi beish misnabe. The obligation is only if you heard it at the time that he was prophesying, and you violated what the Navi said. That's when you have the punishment. Mash'enke when the hertes from Navi speter, as opposed to when you hear it later on from the Navi. He said a prophecy, then he tells you the next day what the prophecy was. Not them that is misnabe. After he finished the prophecy, is as then it's the same status as if you heard it from a translator, and need not be liable for the punishment of hearing from the Navi. Because the Navi is only at the time of the Navi. After you finish the Navi, then you're violating what the Navi said, but you're not that violation that the Pasuk is talking about, not the Misbedei Shamayim. Here the Rebbe comes up with the Chap. So it turns out, according to this, that violating Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy can only be those mitzvahs that we heard directly from Moshe Rabbeinu, which were the mitzvahs, the first two dibros that we heard from Moshe Rabbeinu directly, and therefore, if one violates them, he's violating the Navi. So you have the status of Misa B'dei Shamayim, and maybe that's why the Rambam writes over here, you're over Divrei Nevuas Moshe. So according to this, we can say, as someone in the generation of Moshe, but overgiven of a mitzvah, if he violated the mitzvah that you heard from Moshe, in Moshe's generation, is doing the machiluk, said is over of mitzvahs avodah zarah, or the andere mitzvahs. There's a difference between violating the mitzvah avodah zarah, other mitzvahs. The other mitzvahs we heard from Moshe Rabbeinu not during the time of his prophecy. The mitzvahs avodah zarah we heard during the time of his prophecy. So those mitzvahs that we heard at the time of his prophecy, which is avodah zarah, you would be chayiv derish, you would be chayiv noich ederish mechayiv mitzvah b'dei shamayim. He's doing the machilik to mitzvah avodah zarah and the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs avodah zarah, the bald as a noich v'lo yilach. What man gehert from Moshe Beishin Stabe, the mitzvah noich v'lo yilach we heard from Moshe at the time he was prophesying. But there's oich adin von over al divrei hanavi. So then that is, in addition to violating the Torah, you're violating the words of a Navi. Mashenkim ba'andere mitzvahs, bimbald as menot say gehert from Moshe, noch dem wird say gehert ma'kodesh Baruch Hu. After we heard from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as the Rebbe brings down in the sources over here, different sources that the Anoich Le'ilachol was during the time of the heard from Moshe Rabbeinu at the time of the prophecy, at the time, and this was came later on. Hashem about the mitzvahs. Bald as man say get from Moshe noch them. Wer say get Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We heard them after he heard them Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Is nitov by zay oich b'derech shel Moshe l'chifan avodim hanavi. So even in Moshe Rabbeinu's generation, you're not violating the words of a Navi because you didn't hear it from Navi at the time of the prophecy. And therefore, der mitvot when you can't love them shinui in Loshan Rambam. And with this, we could have explained the change in the language of the Rambam. As the far as Dr. Bavi the Zorah, Lachish Nevuchas Moshe, that's why the Rambam says Bavi the Zorah to contradict the prophecy of Moshe, to make you into a person violating the prophecy, because that's where you prophesy that you get the Mitzvah Shemayim. So Meramazayin, as in them tzibur from Moshe of Avodah Zorah, he's hinting. But this command of Moshe, when he tells you not to do Avodah Zorah, is for there is an additional something unique. In addition to being a command, as all other commandments of the Torah, the Hainu, so you have something special here. It is also a prophecy that you'll be violating in the words of a prophet. That has the definition, the boundaries of the instruction of a Navi at the time that it was Misnabe, which is Avodah Zorah, which we heard from Moshe Rabbeinu at the time of his prophecy. When Amos said is over the Derish of Moshe, when someone in Moshe Rabbeinu's generation is violent, as a Nevuah, is a Chai Mitzvah Shemayim, then he will be liable for Mitzvah Shemayim. The Baldas der din is done nor Avodah Zorah now. But since this halacha is just by Avodah Zorah, the Par Zokt as the Rambam nor benegate to them was Zok. That's what Rambam specifically Zok Makish Nevos Shel Moshe, only with regards to Hashem Tzivo Shete'oved Avodas Kichavim. Over there, because that is has this unique level. I mean, the Rambam is not talking about only to somebody in the Moshe Rabbeinu generation, but he's hinting to this idea that Moshe Rabbeinu has also a prophecy to it because of as it's unique to this mitzvah, only Avodah Zorah. Nor benegay, that's what the Rambam says it only as it relates to them because then you have that unique extra that it's a violation of a prophecy. But when you're coming to uproot a matter from the Rabbanon or from the other things that is interpretation that we have by tradition, because over there it doesn't apply this unique specialty of Avodah Zorah, which is also the words of a Navi by the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, who heard and gave it over to us at the time that he was prophesied. Zion. But the Rebbe says this whole explanation is difficult to say. Aber Levad Zois Zion. Levad Zois is abzeb like Shver. So this would only answer the last piece. Was in Anfang Pedig war it nicht wegen Avodah Zorah. So I come in the beginning of the chapter when he's not speaking about Avodah Zorah. So the Rambam Lahakish Nevos Shel Moshe. He also says it to contradict Moshe's Nebuah. So besides that is the Klolos Abir. It's general explanation of Moshe. Lahakish Nevos Shel Moshe. The Rambam says to contradict Moshe's prophecy, mean the Rambam to Merama Zayin. The Rambam is intending to hint the obligation of the Mitzvah B'dei Shemayim in Moshe's generation. It's a dechir god. Let's read it. Because number one, Aleph, the Baldad din Hanal is place B'dei Shemayim. Since this halacha is only Moshe's generation. After Moshe's generation, there's no nevuah there at all because there's nothing. We never heard anything from Moshe Rabbeinu directly as a nevuah. Is the Chmai the Hava. So what happened? Why would the Rambam be writing that? And based the Chiv Mitzvah de Shemayim by the Zor v'der Amidbar. So the obligation, why you Chayv de Shemayim by the Zor and the Der Amidbar, is Lefia Anal nit verbund mit Inyan von Nevi HaSheker. That has nothing to do being a false prophet, nor mit Inyan von Nevi Zor. That's unique because he was a Nevi Zor. Talking about because he's a false prophet. It has to do that you're going against the words of a Navi at the time of the Nevuah. At that time, you'd be violating the words of a Navi. Nothing to do if he says that Hashem commanded, it's nothing to do with a Navi of Sheker. It has to do whether you're violating the words of a Navi, not the Navi of Sheker. Is a Chaim Mitzvah Shamayim. The time to remember, if somebody would go worship Avodah Zarah, he's Chaim Mitzvah Shamayim. Why? Because in that case, he's violating the words of a Navi at the time that it was said, because he heard the Neichel V'Yilach from Moshe Rabbeinu. He said the Rambam will vote the Rambam in the dinner if he wants to in this dinner this law, but there is gedacht on Nichas Avodah Zarah, then he should do Nichas Avodah Zarah. Or nicht beim Din von Nevi HaSheker, the Rambam Redon, not about the laws of the false Navi, which the Rambam talks about over here. So it doesn't make really fit to say that what the Rambam says in Machas Nevuah is for this idea that is a Nevuah, which this is not the discussion over here. It's the discussion of Nevi HaSheker. So the Rebbe is going to explain all this. First, the Rebbe is going to explain what do we mean something has the force of Torah and something that is only a prophecy. That basically, the Rebbe asked, or the Rebbe established in Eis Aleph that there is a special weight, a toikef, when it comes to mitzvah of the Torah. And then the Rebbe wanted to know, since there is a special weight for mitzvah of the Torah, so why does the Rambam, first of all, in the end of Perek Ches, also bring down this idea of nevuah, down nevuah, and especially in Perek Ches, the Rambam 2 times brings down the word nevuah, that you contradict the nevuah, and just 1 time he says Teres Moshe. So first we're going to establish what is the meaning, the difference between something which is the toikef of a mitzvah of the Torah. But now first time back in the beer, we kitzur akaponim in them was another month, 3 years Sif Aleph. This that was mentioned earlier in Sif Aleph. Like the Megeder ba'alocha or bepardes ha'Torah b'chlal, about the definition in halacha, and also in Pshat the Remesh Drus Torah in general. So not only in halacha is there a difference between a mitzvah and a nevuah, a Torah mitzvah and a nevuah, but also in the Pshat the Remesh Drus in all areas of Torah, there's a difference between a halacha and the Torah. Und der Meile from mitzvahs ha-Torah b'Har Sinai. So first understanding in halacha, and what is the advantage of mitzvahs ha-Torah b'Har Sinai of the tzivuyim shal de'anivur? Why is a mitzvah that the Torah records greater? What's the advantage over the command of the prophets? Yes, we said that. That's what the Rambam tried to say in the beginning. And we know there's a difference in mitzvah before Matan Torah and after Matan Torah, and even after Matan Torah with Zanavi. But what is it? From word anoichi, the word anoichi Hashem Elokecha. So that's where the Aseres Adibros, 10 commandments begin. The erste word of the Aseres Adibros, which is the first words of the saying, which is Klolus Kol HaTorah. This is the generality of all Torah, is the Luchos, the 10 commandments. Zog the Gemara says, as anoichi is a Rosh Tevis, and no nafshi k'sovis yonos. I myself have written into the Torah, and I've given myself into the Torah. As der Eberster hat sich kavayachol reingeschrieben und reingegeben in Torah. That Hashem, so to speak, has written himself in and gave himself into the Torah. Uber Medrash, as the Lashon, the Medrash is, as durch Torah is oisi atem lich. That through Torah, you take me, you take Hashem. Hashem himself is in the Torah. Was der Faris movement. That's why it's understood. As the mitzvahs ha-Torah, seine nit nor a mittel zu Kabbalah schar. That the Torah commands are not only a means, the commands of the Torah are not just means how to receive reward. Do the mitzvah, we get reward. Or it's the Grechens and the Maila for the Ilif Zgula, or for us to reach to the greatness, to the elevation of being unique, chosen from Hashem, as Gula. Mamlechas Kohanim and Kodesh, being a nation of priests, a holy nation. Tzaref is some of these all different languages to purify and make us into something special. This is not the real reason. That's not the advantage. That's not what Torah is. But rather that just in them themselves, not for something else. The mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. That is taking Hashem, not for something else. The intent and the purpose, the goal is just the Torah in of itself. This is just as it does not fit to say about Hashem, Anon Nafshi. Who's the Anon Nafshi? You say Anon Nafshi, Ksovis Yovis. Hashem put himself in the Torah, so we can't say with regards to Hashem. As Eris Chaz v'Sholem and Tzoyitz and Misabish, that he is a intermediate something else. Azoi is as the Shaykhs to Zogon the Negayets of the Mitzvah Torah. We cannot also say that with regards to the Torah mitzvahs, because in Zay is though there are an Afshi which there is, I have given myself. Just like by Hashem is not a middle for something else, the Torah which he gave himself in the Torah is not for something else. Und das ist euch der Tam, was the mitzvahs beTorah. This is also the reason that the Torah mitzvahs seinen la'olam u'l'ol me'olam. They are forever and forever ever. Says oi in zeini shayach kein shinu giroin otosav. Can be no change, nothing diminishing or nothing to add. Warum vibal das Torah mitzvahs enthalten sich dem Anon Nafshi. Since Torah and the mitzvahs contain in it the Anon Nafshi, Hashem himself, I myself, from Hashem, is doch the Tzaychen Zeiken Shinui. So therefore, it does not apply in them a change. Kishem this is the Tzaychen Shinui, them Eberstein Alain, just as there is no change in Hashem himself. The signal nachar, using a different style. When the Rotzen HaKodesh Baruch Hu in the mitzvahs HaTorah, if the will of HaKodesh Baruch Hu in the Torah was given nor bichdei durch sie zu bekommen schar, just so that we can get reward by doing them, or to the Grechen HaMaila B'chulu, or to reach some sort of an advantage, like we said before. Given Shaykh zu sagen, then it would apply. You can say as Ashinui, that when there is a change, Aliyah, Yerida, an elevation or descent, the Mekayma mitzvahs, those who fulfill the mitzvahs, all greater than Ashinui in the mitzvahs should cause a change in the mitzvahs. If the mitzvahs were goal-oriented for something else, in order to achieve, so then the act of the people who fulfill the mitzvahs brings a change also in those mitzvahs. In the mitzvah Torah, since, however, the desire of Hashem in the mitzvahs of the Torah is an essence, so he wants on of his own. So then it does not really apply that there should be a change in this, God forbid. And al derech zeh is the ma'ila from Torah beif nevuah. That is also similar to this, is the advantage from Torah over prophecy. The tzivuyim shal yidei hanevuyim, the commands which the neviim instruct, such as l'chul l'makom ploni, go to a place, or that al telchu, don't go, chiyetzubay, or similar. They were said for some benefit. That is going to result to come out of this. That's why these are temporary instructions for the time, for the benefit. Even those instructions that come to instruct on the words of the Torah, and to warn the people not to transgress it. Such as saying, remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant. So that instruction is not they themselves, but they're telling us about the words of the Torah. But when we talk about the words of the Torah, is be'ikar, it's mainly Zei Gufa. They themselves, not something they are the will, the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is his essence will. And this is their tam, and this is the reason was ein Navi Achshoy L'Chadesh Dover B'Torah. A Navi has no right to come up with something new in Torah. Al the Dvar Havaya from Torah, because the word of Hashem of Torah is Hecher from the Dvar Havaya Shem Nebuah, is higher than the word of Hashem which is in the prophecy. So basically, this gives us the explanation what the Rebbe spoke of at the beginning of the Sikha about the advantage of Torah over the mitzvahs over the Navi. Is the fact is that the mitzvahs of the Torah is anon nafshi, is Hashem Himself. Is no, that's the essence of the will of Hashem that doesn't change, as opposed to the words of a Navi. But yet, the Rebbe says there is advantage in the words of the Navi. Afal piyas, the toike from Torah is greser with the toike from the Torah, though that the force of Torah is greater than the force of prophecy. And it's specifically Torah stands forever and ever. Is over mitzadem gufa do amayla b'negein Ibrahim. But for that alone, that is not always. So relative to the created being, there's an advantage in Nevuah Iber Torah. Prophecy has an advantage over Torah. The Baal Torah is the Ratzon Atzmi Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Since Torah is the essence of the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is a Hecher Be'ein Aref together Nivraim. So it's infinitely, immeasurably greater from the boundaries of the created being. As his own Kenan Teufel sein, Masik sein Etzem HaTorah, for them to be able to grasp and to understand the essence of the Torah. Mashenkin and Nevuah, as opposed to prophecy, prophecy is idea of prophecy. It's revealing godliness to created being. Shem reveals his secret to the Izayer Geder. So there, the definition of Nevuah to give to Nivraim, if you meet the criteria, the condition to become a Navi, Chacham Gibber, so you actually grasp it. Is thus an eifon as these galus put by in Lamato, so then that revelation impacts by Yidden below a toikev ha'amuna in Elikus. It gives a force in our belief in Hashem. Torah is aloof, is higher, is beyond. But when the idea of prophecy is the Torah to come down and revealed in a way that once you meet the criteria, it can get captured, it can get brought into the revelation, and it brings them a force of a munafas. Is moving the Arichas Abin and Rambam Perichas. Understand the great length that the Rambam explains it in chapter 8. In the Oifun von Hamuna von Eden in Nevuas Moshe, in the way of the belief that the Eden believe in Moshe's prophecy, on Torah's Moshe and the Torah that Moshe gave us, file. Das is nicht stam asipul b'Torah. Why does the Rambam have to tell us that? It's not just the Rambam is telling us a story of Torah, nor a halacha. This is a halacha. I mean, the halachas and Dotzre Inyan. There's two aspects in this halacha. Aleph. Number one, the Amunah v'sai dar gloibun in Nevuas Moshe. The belief that a Yid needs to believe in the prophecy of Moshe, dar zayin b'toikev habados, needs to be with the full certainty. An Amunah shleimo she'ein bo yidofi. It should be a complete belief without any hesitation. That's one. Base. Number two, as the Amunah zol zayin bo'ifin kazeh. In order for the Amunah to be in that level, it needs to be not because of signs. We have to ask to be, why is it? Because we have seen it and we have heard it. So first of all, we need to believe without any hesitation. How could that be without hesitation? Is because we've seen it and we've heard it. Only then can there be a complete, a wholesome belief without any hesitation. Same thing is as it relates to the Rambam explains. Why we should not believe and not listen to a Novi Vasis who's coming to contradict Moshe's prophecy. Why don't we believe in him? Even if he shows wonders and signs, great ones. Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy is not based on the signs. So that we can compare this wonder to this wonder. But we saw it with our eyes and we heard it with our ears. And Zebol is coming to contradict that which you've seen with your eyes. So it's not just a explanation and a proof for that we don't listen to it. It's not, we're trying not to tell you an explanation that the Rebbe asked in the beginning. This is a logical explanation, not a halacha. This is a halacha how you cannot believe in another shekel. Aleph, that toikev havados in the Ramunah darzana kedekach. The force of the certainty in this belief should be to that extent. Biz afilu oisus umevsim gedolim, that you have great, wondrous miracles. Well, mitmatel sofik zayin that Ramunah will not place any doubt in your belief. And bichdei, number two, bichdei as the Ramunah is only to abgeschmacht werden. So that the taka doesn't impact you, and your Amunah should not be weakened through the signs and the miracles. Because durch them was a yid is by a yid explaining to himself. This contradicts the prophecy of Moshe that we've seen and we've heard. So this gives us the certainty, the halacha, that we cannot. There's no doubt that they're wrong. And even if you bring signs and miracles, do not have the ability to place a doubt that something was that you saw in your eyes. There's haste and the shleimus that take it from the full force, the absolute force, that you don't listen to Navi, is mitzadem because he is coming to contradict the prophecy of Moshe that we've heard, that we've seen and heard. So basically, this is not just a logical explanation, but this is the part of our belief and how we sustain it, that the realization is there is no question, there is no doubt, and based upon the fact that we've seen it, and therefore that overrides, that's how we stay strong, both in the positive to believe in the Navi Moshe Rabbeinu, and also the negative not to follow the Navi who's coming to contradict Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Rebbe brings now a dogma in Ois Yud that the certainty that you get through seeing is beyond anything else, and that's part of that mitzvah that we're talking about the believing in Moshe and not believing the Navi, because there is coming to contradict. It's from a halacha. A dogma v'nafkamina b'halacha l'maisa b'poyel will be an example, and it also make a difference in actual practical halacha. Where you see the force when you see something with your eyes is the halacha of ein eid nasedayin. A witness that saw cannot become the judge over the fact that he saw, because a judge has to have the ability to weigh the evidence and to try to see if it's clear or not. But if you've seen it, you can't weigh. Ein eid nasedayin. Since he saw it with your eyes, is that toikev shoylo the megalchkeit v'tzilu. So that force of having seen something, that takes away the possibility of, the Torah says v'shavtei v'tzilu, you should try to save it. You can't save the person because you saw it. So therefore, you have to be a judge only if you're not an aidist. Then you need to have somebody else who hasn't seen it. But if you just hear it, even if you heard it from 100 kosher witnesses, then you're still the judge. You can still be itzilu, because seeing is a totally different category. Yudalef. Yashleimar, we can say as the tam pnimi, favos der Eibishter, hodi nevuas Moshe ma'amizgan. What is the inner reason why Hashem made this the truth of the prophecy of Moshe given an Oifen when they named the role? He made it in such a strong way at the giving of the Torah. Davke by Maimed Har Sinai, when we were standing by Har Sinai. The Rambam is Ma'arich, the Rambam prolongs that we saw Hashem, the Moshe Rabbeinu talking and with the Torah, the whole gate getting the Torah. So why was it at that point is about the Tachlis for Nevuas Moshe? Because the ultimate goal of Moshe's prophecy is to poil sein, is to impact us by Eden, so that herd werden, that the Eden should be able to really sense, to feel, not just to know the truth of that Eibishter is true, Havai Elikim, from godliness in general, nor euch der emes from Torah. Eibishter wants us to feel the truth of Torah. Was is mitzad atzma hechef together and nivroim, which on of itself is higher than the boundaries of the creation. So we need it to be sort of felt. So that's why the Eibishter made it in such a way that the truth should be there, so that something which is higher should really impact us. So we should be able to sort of really believe it and feel it and understand it. Through the fact that we saw with our eyes and we hear with our ears, we saw the prophecy of Moshe, the Amunah Shleima. That gives us the true, complete belief. Has no hesitation. Then we get, through the prophecy of Moshe, through the being able to see that elevates and gives us the strength that also Torah, which is higher than Nevuah. During Matan Torah, we can see that, so that the Torah gets that certainty. Shloimar can say, those was the Toikev HaAmunah in Torah. Is dark durch Nevuos Moshe. That the force of the belief in Torah comes specifically to Moshe's prophecies as the var It's for the reason because his prophecies are the highest step and level of prophecy. When in Vedic tzavas and in both extremes, also the revelation of the prophecy was the Isgalus Elikus is in the Hechsten. The revelation of godliness to Moshe Rabbeinu came in the highest form. The Marev Levichidis, it was in a vision and not with riddles. And also on the other side, so that the revelation was from the highest part, and also his standing was that his Omed Alam de Shalom, he would be standing wholly on his place. To say, to him, it was revealed to him, there is Lamata Shalom Mamash as he is below, completely whole. And the Riber is Zayin Nevuah Akeli, and that's why his prophecy becomes the vehicle to draw down, to bring down the Torah which is beyond created being. And he's able to bring it down and get it into the definition, into the created beings. So often by Zayd, the Toikev Muna is Amsus in Torah, and to accomplish by them the force of their belief and the truthfulness in Torah. The mit is musbar, but this we understand was invited in Perek. In the next Perek, in the Perek Tes, the Rambam read wegen einem was sagt. The Rambam discusses it by one who says Shahavaye Shloch Elohis Mitzvah Hashem sent him to Adam Mitzvah. Das heißt, that means it is Makrish Damitis HaTorah. He is contradicting the truthfulness of the Torah. Schreibt the Rambam the Losh, that's what the Rambam writes the language. Had is a Novi Sheker, he's a false Novi Shadibol Lahakrish Nevuah Shal Moshe. He's coming to contradict Moshe's Nevuah. The Rebbe asked, why doesn't it say that he's coming to contradict the Torah? Das is nit stam aichocha as a Novi Sheker. This is not just a plain proof that he's a false Navi. Nor der mit is the Rambam Machadish Nocha Alocha. Here the Rambam comes up with a novel new halacha. Koch as Nevuas Moshe is lamata from Torah, although Nevuas Moshe is on a lower level of Torah, Ibald over as Nevuas Moshe is ma'ames damun in Torah. Since, however, Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecies is what gives the truthful amuna in the Torah to B'neinu Reinu Shamanu. This is through Moshe Rabbeinu as ein lo leishinu chulu, that there is no change. Unaz ein dover ashol chadish dover that we cannot come up with anything new. Who says that? The Torah says that, but Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy makes this, authenticates the Torah. The Riber darf euch der Toike für Schlilas HaKosher. So therefore, the force of negating this contradiction, nicht zu Herrlich zu Reisen Moshe, kommen Davke mitzad Nevuah Shal Moshe, that it comes specifically. Why don't we listen to him? This is the two prophets that I've said before. We don't listen to him because Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy authenticated, made it truthful, that what the Torah says. So the Rambam writes here is that you're not only going against the Torah, you're going against the truthfulness of the Torah, which came about through the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu. So basically, the above comes to a very specific, unique explanation and say that in the Chalukas HaProtim, in the order and how the chapters have been divided, the Hilchos Yisod HaTorah, Binyan HaNevuah, in the way the chapters are divided as far as the prophecy. That is Meirich in the Protim Shabazeh. And as the Rambam goes into the length and the details. In Perek Zayin, in Perek Zayin, read the Rambam Binyan HaNevuah B'chlal. In chapter 7, the Rambam discusses generally the theme of prophecy. And also, Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy happens in the way greatest level of prophecy. And there is Meirich in the Protim as he belongs in the details. No, the Hemshech to the Goyle in the Voice Moshe as a follow-up to the great advantage in Moshe's prophecy is a Mamshech in the Perek Shlachar. He continues in the following Perek as mitzad them is do nocha hechelkeit in the Voice Moshe. And from this, there is also a greater level. Besides the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a greater thing in Moshe Rabbeinu. Was Bamehi Minu Boy, that what gave him the belief with what B'Maimed Har Sinai was B'Maimed Har Sinai was the nevuah, which means it's not just a nevuah, but it's a nevuah was in Eifum from the Reinu B'Shamanu. We've seen it, we heard it. That elevates the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu on a higher level. And as a follow-up to do it. As Nevuas Moshe is carbon with Maimed Har Sinai, that Moshe's prophecy is connected with Maimed Har Sinai. Zokter invited the Pedic. That's why he says in the next Pedic and Pedic test, as with Sadem is Nevuas Moshe Ma'amis, Oich the Amuna in Amitis HaTorah Shel Maimed Nevuah. That because of Nevuas Moshe, which has been so authenticated, this authenticates also the Amunah and the truth of the Torah, which is higher than Nevuah. Those was Torah is a medes la'ad la'ol malom melomim. Ve'ein novi l'shoy l'chadish dover. That it stands for always, and the Navi cannot come up with anything new. It's been the Amis has been authenticated by Moshe Rabbeinu because Shemayim V'Reinu. U'b'moyle Eba Navi comes to zok shavai shloch Elohim mitzvah. The Navi comes to say that Hashem sent him to Adam mitzvah. Is there makrish nevuos shel Moshe? He contradicts the Moshe's prophecy. But later on, the Rambam uses again the lashon of Torah. Doesn't say nevuos Moshe. But then lashon lachish nevuos shel Moshe. Shraib the Rambam belois. Rambam only writes this language when the Geit Sanovi v'zok chash v'Hashem shloch l'asas mitzvah v'chulu to do a mitzvah. Unoich by them v'zok Hashem tzivos shtavad v'zichavim. You should worship in the beginning and the end of Periktas. When you uproot an item which you learn by tradition, it says Hashem told me the law is such. It doesn't say they're beating them. Why? When he says to Adam mitzvah to make a way. The Farid the mitzvah Torah pirush lo yishamanu Moshe, pirush that we didn't hear from Moshe. Malachas kam v'kamer berzok shavai tzivos the Avodah Avedis Kechavim. Is there mekuvim for zaydibur? What is he intending with his speech? What he's saying? So makir zayin dem yisoid from Maimed Har Sinai. He's trying to contradict the basis of the standing by Har Sinai, as the Eibishter at Oizgich Libun Moshe Rabbeinu, that Hashem has chosen Moshe Rabbeinu. Und durch ihn gegeben in ganz Torah, he gave the whole Torah through him. That's what they're trying to do and say there's something different, you can change it. The Baldas Maimed Har Sinai is by Eden Nisamas geworden durch them. And since, how do we, the truthfulness of the standing of Sinai became through, we've seen with our eyes and heard the prophecy that Moshe Rabbeinu prophesied. So Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy is the basis for Matan Torah for the authentication. Says that it turns out that he's contradicting Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy. There was but a person who uproots a word, an item that the Rabbanon instituted, or he says that they've told me in such chulu, he said, that's not contradiction, the basis of all Torah. Eret Norveg Nadin Proti in Torah is only speaking about a specific halacha in Torah. As Lloyd Zayin Nevuah is the din kach, that according to his prophecy, this is the way the din is. So, specific din. And he's a digach, but he's not going against all of the Ma'amad Har Sinai. He says, as Ken Zayin, as Kivnes Halacha, the Tamis HaTomel Taz HaTorah. He can even do according to the Halacha. And that still would be he's coming to actually to say that it's true what the Torah said. But he's basing it, he's saying, this is what the Eibishter told me. That's Pashamayim, that's against the Torah. So he doesn't have to even be contradicting the Torah with his statement. But Lepoil is Azah Oif Paskan Halachas, but in actuality, to be able to rule Halachas in such a way, Hepech from Tzivah the Torah that goes against the command of Torah. The Tzivah Torah Loi Pashamayim, Torah says it's not in the heaven. Therefore, Zogdoni the Rambam Lahakish Nevos Moshe. The Rambam doesn't say to contradict Moshe's prophecy, but Lahakish HaTorah goes against the Torah because this is not specifically against the whole Ma'amad Har Torah. Bal Yedner is Makish not a din from Torah. He's only contradicting a halach of Torah. But not Ma'amad Har Sinai, but not the whole standing of Sinai. We need to say the Kol HaTorah, not the foundation of the Torah. Which has been truthfully authenticated through the prophecy of Moshe that we saw and that we heard. This is Mesichas Chag HaShavuos for Shabbos Parshas Nosei Tov Shin Lamed Daled.